Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds all of you well and in good spirits and safe and secure during these times. Once again, please take very good care of yourselves and your loved ones. And I want to thank you once again for expressing an interest in these Q&A videos. So if you'll permit me, please allow me to continue on, this time with part 5. At the video comment section of the video where I asked for questions, and I'm just going in order of receipt, so as they appear on that page. So the next question I received is from our dear friend Terry Johnson. Hello, Terry. It's nice to see you as always. Hello, Daisuke. I'd like to know of any other interests that you may have. I'd also enjoy hearing a little bit about yourself in general. Thank you, my friend. So I may have touched upon a little bit of my background in these past Q&A videos and also with past videos on this channel. So I'm not quite sure where I could begin, but I could let you know in terms of any other interests that I have. I'm also very, in addition to some of the interests that I might have expressed in previous Q&A videos, I'm also very interested in exercise, and in particular in weightlifting. And so when I was when was it now? In my mid-20s or so. So I'm now 40 years old, but in my mid-20s, so about 15 or so years ago, I was living in Japan at the time, and I had become very interested in exercise and also in weightlifting. And so I tried out a local bodybuilding competition. And the results of the competition, it was very local, and the results were not so good compared to the other competitors of that local competition. And the other competitors were much more experienced and much more well-defined in terms of their muscle mass and definition than I was at the time. But still, it was a really nice experience for me because it allowed me to focus in on a particular type of activity, which up to then I wasn't necessarily into. And ever since then, I had a friend at the time who was also a professional bodybuilder, and he was also a personal trainer. And so I befriended him, and he gave me a lot of tips that helped me out. And ever since then, I've been pretty into exercise to the extent possible. And even up to recently, with this current world crisis, I would go to the gym here in Tokyo rather frequently, and because I loved exercise and I loved weightlifting, and also I am very much into aerobics here in Japan. You know, Japan has a lot of sports clubs and gyms, and one of the things I really enjoy doing is the aerobics classes. And I've taken aerobics classes in New York when I was living there in New York, and it's a very fun time. It's like a little sort of party almost, and the same is true, or a similar kind of vibe is true for aerobics classes here in Japan, but it's a little bit of a different kind of it's a little bit of a different kind of process, and it's, I think, equally as fun here in Japan, and you have to remember all these moves and these combinations of steps, etc., within the space of an hour. And it's actually quite difficult to remember everything that you've just been told on the spot, and then boom, you have to remember all these configurations. I don't know, I'm not sure how many of you have taken aerobics before, but there's a certain set of sequence of steps aerobic steps that are combined. One of my favorite classes here was very, very difficult, and it was very complicated in terms of the arrangement of steps each time, and then it was divided up into blocks, usually blocks of 3, sometimes 4, and then block 1, block 2, block 3, block 4, and each block had its own set of aerobics choreography that you just essentially had to remember, because just on that day, and then if you could remember it, that's great, but then you moved on to the second block and a different set of choreography, and then the third block and a different set of choreography, and then the fourth block and a different set of choreography, and then you have to remember the entire thing. And then if we had time, then you change the order, or you'd put something here or there just to mix it all up and make it even more complicated. And so that was a lot of fun for me. And unfortunately, and also combined with that, I would also do weightlifting exercises as well. I was very much into weightlifting, and I still am. And I had a certain level that I achieved in terms of my weight, body weight, and bench press, and then also the squat for the legs, and then also the deadlift, as well as other exercises. I also was and that sort of thing. However, unfortunately, due to this current world crisis, I'm not going to the gym at all, because it's better, of course, to be extra safe and careful during these times. So I haven't been to the sports club or gym in, maybe about 2 months or so, maybe, I think, give or take. So it's a little bit, that hobby or activity has been curtailed quite significantly during these past couple months. And so I've had to do my best with other forms of exercise, but it's a little bit limited. But still, that's something that I was very much interested in. And hopefully when this whole crisis is behind us, then I can return to the gym and work out and just enjoy exercise the way I used to. So there's that. So yeah, so I hope that explains a little bit of what other interests that I have, and the like. And again, I how should I put it? I think my level is not so high when compared to other people in my same weight class or age group, but still, it was always a lot of fun to try to go to the gym and always try to better any results that I had the previous week or something. So that was one of the things that I actually reached really good levels in terms of my weightlifting until this crisis erupted. And so I think I've any gains that I might have made in the first few months of this year, I think I've lost. But that's just the nature of this stuff, and it's much better to be safe than sorry. So when all this stuff is behind us, of course, then I'll be trying to get back to that. So anyway, thank you very much for your question, and best regards. Next is Dr. 13. And you ask, is there a director or actor that you feel never made a bad or mediocre film? Keeping in consideration that quality is subjective, of course. Sure, so perhaps I'm talking about a particular director now named John Carpenter. And I honestly, truly believe that he has never made a bad film. There are some films that are stronger than others, sure, but a bad film, I don't think he's made a bad film. I think the same is true for someone like Shohei Imamura, the Japanese filmmaker. I don't think he's ever made a bad film, at least something that I haven't seen. And at least something that all the films that I've seen by him, I think, are just really great. Of course, the same thing applies. There might be some that are better than others, but that's, again, subjective, as you suggest. David Lynch also, I would, again, the same caveat applies, of course. And I'm sure there are others, but Edward Yang, I've mentioned Edward Yang a number of times. So, and there are many, many others, but those are just examples, I think. So, but thank you very much for your great question, Dr. 13, and I hope you're well. Just looking at your name, of course, what can I say? Your question is great. Your question is brilliant. So, thank you very much. Next is our dear friend Mary Quiet. So hello, Mary Quiet. It's always nice to hear from you. Do you have any guilty pleasure films that would be a surprise to your audience? For instance, I adore the works of Yang, Ackerman, and Hitchcock, but some of my favorite guilty pleasure films are the Blake Edwards Pink Panther films, particularly the 3 from the 70s. Best wishes. And best wishes to you too, my friend. How shall I answer this? So there might be a few, actually, and I'll give an example, maybe the most recent example, and I'll say that maybe I'll answer by saying maybe a particular work that upon my mentioning it might surprise a number of viewers could be the one I'm about to say next, which is at the outbreak or around the time this world crisis really broke out, and it was really quite a panic. It still is, of course. It's quite a panic situation. But at around a couple months or so ago, I was hearing the news, and I was feeling a bit down, to be perfectly honest. I was feeling somewhat saddened by this current situation, how it would affect our daily lives and my daily lives. Of course, there's a greater good involved, don't get me wrong, I completely appreciate that. But of course, there's also a sense of sadness of how things are affected, of course. And there was a moment there about a couple months ago, and I was feeling a little bit blue. And I through chance, I suppose, I was looking on YouTube, and I came across the music video of what's his name? Corey Feldman's music video. It's called Ascension Millennium. So Ascension Millennium by Corey Feldman, and I had seen it before. I remember the news that was generated at the time that video had been released, and all this, and his attempt at trying to really make break out in the music industry. Several years ago, I think. I'm not sure exactly. I don't really follow his musical career that much, so I don't know to what extent he has discography after that moment. But around the time that Ascension Millennium, the music video, was first released, I'd already known about Corey Feldman, but I didn't really follow it since then. But then recently, for whatever reason, it just came up, and I decided to watch it again. And I really enjoyed it a lot, and maybe I enjoyed it for some reasons that perhaps the artist didn't necessarily intend. There is a certain interesting, how should I put it? There's a certain interesting flavor to the entire arc of that particular story that's being depicted in Ascension Millennium. In those, whatever it is, 2-3 minutes, a kind of an entire world is being depicted, and it has a sort of it has this kind of, what do you call it, one take feel, which I think is pretty interesting. But it was something that, as I say, maybe I got more enjoyment out of it in certain ways that perhaps the artist didn't necessarily intend. That being said, it was something that really gave me some enjoyment, and it really made me happy watching. And so I was very much into Corey Feldman's music video, Ascension Millennium. It's, is it the greatest piece of music I've heard? Well, perhaps not. But is it the greatest music video I've ever seen? Perhaps not. But it was, I think, it put a smile on my face when I was watching it. And so there's that. So there's Ascension Millennium and Corey Feldman. And his music video. And I'm sure there are many others I could mention, but that's the one that comes to mind immediately. So anyway, thank you very much for your question. Next is MaximusMansteel. And hello, MaximusMansteel. So you ask, the upcoming Heat discussion, so the film, the Michael Mann film Heat, has me wondering if you would ever consider a deeper dive into the works of Michael Mann. He's got so many wonderful films. I'd love to see him get the Carpenter treatment. Well, it's a very good idea. I'll certainly think about it. I can't necessarily claim to be any deep expert in the works of Michael Mann, but I have seen his films, including Heat, of course. So that would be something to consider. I can't make any promises, of course, but I'll certainly consider it. But a great suggestion. Well, thank you very much, my friend. Next is Steve Millman, So hello, Steve. Now you say 50% of the audience will not watch a black and white film, and 90% will not watch if there is subtitles, so Criterion produces films for a select audience. How many copies of a film do you think they would make so they can also make some kind of profit for all the work they have done? Okay, so that's a very interesting question. So I don't know specifically about these particular figures that you cite, 50% and 90%. So I don't know about that. I haven't verified that. But let's I will go along with. It's a great question, of course, and I will go along with. Let's have the assumption, therefore, that let's say a certain portion of consumers won't necessarily watch a black and white film or a film with subtitles. So let's rephrase it that way. And in that case, what is the situation for Criterion, or what is my assumption for the situation for Criterion? And I would say probably that, again, I can't make any guess as to the exact numbers of the Criterion production plans, and I'm sure it's different for each particular title. And I also know that, as I was trying to allude to in a previous video, I think I would be very surprised, and this is all my guesswork, but I would be very, very surprised if Criterion were paying the exact same rate of royalties for each of the licensors that are granting intellectual property rights to Criterion with respect to Criterion's releases, either in Blu-ray or DVD format, or in streaming services, or both. So that is all to say that I think it really depends on the title, and I think this is all my best guess, of course, but it depends on the title. It also depends on the negotiating power and the bargaining power of the licensor, and also it depends on how much Criterion really wants it, and the like. And then based off of those sort of numerical analyses, then Criterion would have to figure out its budget and then have to decide how many units to produce in consideration of that particular budget that it's allotted to a particular title. So I think it's all relative, and so I can't really give any precise numbers. But I would also I would not be surprised if, let's say, as a general proposition, the black and white films, or the films with subtitles, would be films that maybe, in general anyway, might see production numbers that are perhaps lesser than more quote-unquote notable or immediately popular titles, in air quotes, of course, because I know that's subjective. So I would not be surprised if that were the case. Let me put it that way. So I think ultimately it depends not just on the amount of units that are produced, but also it depends on the royalty scheme, the rates of royalties that are being provided under the relevant license agreement, and also just the overall budget that Criterion has allotted to a particular title. And I think it's all a complete package like that. But again, a really great question, Steve, and thank you very much. You're thinking a lot about these particular issues and concerns with respect to the types of films that Criterion is known for. So well done, Steve, and a great question. And let's see, another question we have is from Marc L. So hello, Mark. It's nice to hear from you as always. And you ask, we all see you love cinema very much. Have you ever thought of a career as a movie director, or is it a career you regret not doing? So great. So yes, I have mentioned this particular aspect in past Q&A videos, so you can refer to those if you like. And let me say that, again, I did think about it, but it wasn't necessarily a really serious think. Now that I recall, it was just something that, it was a nice little, maybe it was a dream, but it wasn't necessarily a really life dream or anything like that. It was just something that I was really passionate about at the time. But I realized also that making films is a very difficult thing, and it really is a kind of a discipline and a kind of talent that I certainly don't possess, and I really respect those who do. It's a really great thing to be able to have and possess and share with the world. So I encourage anyone who is interested, seriously interested in trying to make a film of some sort. Please, you have my support and my well wishes to you. For as I hope you have enough. I hope you meet a lot of success and a lot of artistic satisfaction in the work that you do. So yes, so anyway, thank you very much, Mark, for your wonderful question. I really like that, and warmest regards to you, my friend. Next is our dear friend Patrick Doherty, and hello, my dear friend, I hope you're well. And you say, are there any films which are highly rated, loved by many people that you personally don't like? Cheers, Daisuke. Oh gosh, this is a pretty difficult question, and I would say that highly rated, loved, that's a phrase that is maybe a little bit, it's subject to interpretation, of course. And let me give you one example. And I know this film has been highly, highly rated, maybe loved by many people. And so I don't want to suggest that because I feel this way about this film, I don't want to affect how you feel if you happen to really, really love the film. It's not that I don't like the film, because I like the film very much, but I don't know if I am as engaged with the film as, let's say, other people or other critics were and are. And it's the film called Skyfall, which is the James Bond film Skyfall with Daniel Craig. And as you know, the Daniel Craig James Bond films started with Casino Royale, and then Quantum of Solace, then Skyfall, then Spectre, and then there's another film that I think is planned to come out called No Time to Die, I think. So I love James Bond films, and I particularly like the Daniel Craig era, although I must say that I am not necessarily, I'm not the, how should I put it? I know some people are really, really big fans of Skyfall, and they are great James Bond film enthusiasts, and they really, really know their Bond films, and they think Skyfall is one of the greats in the James Bond film pantheon. And so I respect those opinions very much. However, again, for me personally, I do have some maybe issues that perhaps prevent me from really fully engaging with the film as much as I would like to. And so I do, and I think part of it has to do also with the fact that I actually really, really adore Casino Royale. I think that's one of the best James Bond films, in my own personal opinion. It's certainly in the top 5, maybe in the top 3 for me of the James Bond film series. And also, I know that the film Quantum of Solace is not the highest regarded James Bond film out there, and I know it's been subject to some criticism, and I don't think it's a perfect film by far, but I do admire the way in which it is trying to present a kind of confusing landscape in the world of spycraft and James Bond. And I actually think that the world of spycraft, when it's, examples of when spycraft on cinema and TV are done well is when it's done in a confusing way. It shows like, who do you trust? What can we trust? What exactly is going on? That's not true for all spy films. There are spy films that have a more linear approach to narrative, and they're really, really great. So don't get me wrong about that, of course. But with Quantum of Solace, what I really admired about that, it had a very confusing aspect to its structure, such that you didn't necessarily know who was telling the truth and who wasn't. You didn't necessarily get a sense of the allegiances. People that you thought were good guys maybe were not so good, or people who were not so good maybe were good. It wasn't quite clear, and I actually really admired that aspect of Quantum of Solace. There are other issues with the film that I have, but that's one of the things that I think really makes it a very different film. And it's quite striking too, the fact that on the one hand it is kind of direct sequel to Casino Royale, and while we have a continuity in the James Bond universe, we've never necessarily had a direct sequel in this kind of fashion. that we saw with Casino Royale and then Quantum of Solace. So I was actually quite looking forward to Skyfall when it was released, but I must admit that there are, and don't get me wrong, there are some great things about Skyfall in terms of the way it looks and the kind of attempt at trying to get at a certain sense of James Bond's past, the character's past, and also not just his past, but also the past of other characters. And I thought that was really great and really kind of exciting. So I think it's a really good film. It's just that I don't know if I have engaged with the film enough to necessarily call it, for example, the greatest James Bond film ever. Because I haven't experienced it enough, and I haven't engaged with it enough, and there are some things there that I still need to work out. So that would be an example of a film where I don't. Maybe a lot of people really love it, and I can say that I like it, but I need more time with it. Let me put it that way. So there's Skyfall, and then there's Spectre, of course, which I think. I do have a number of issues with that film as well, but I don't think it's a bad film by any means. But it does things in a little bit of an interesting way. But who knows? Maybe I can reserve my detailed comments for a separate video one of these days if you're interested. I don't know, but anyway, that might be an example. Again, I don't want to offend anyone who is really into the film Skyfall. If you are, that's really great, and maybe you can teach me a couple things that I don't have clear in my own head about the film. So maybe you can help me have a better appreciation of that film if you are someone who really loves that film. So if you find yourself in that position, please teach me, please inform me, and I'm very happy to hear any thoughts that you have about that. So anyway, my friend, thank you so much for the great question, and cheers. Next is AllThingsFilm, our dear friend AllThingsFilm. Hello. And you ask, what is your favorite film from your least favorite director and your least favorite film from your favorite director? Okay, so I think I answered this question in a previous Q&A, so but thank you very much, a great question. And actually this is a good point, so I should just let me use this opportunity to add a little addendum to my answer to this previous question in the last Q&A. And I think I made my answer with respect to Oliver Stone and Oliver Stone films. And I just want to say that, and I should have mentioned it before, and I was planning on mentioning, but it just slipped my mind at the last minute. But I want to say that, I don't want anyone to feel like they are, maybe I have certain feelings about Oliver Stone and Oliver Stone's works, but of course, if anyone feels very positively about Oliver Stone's, the filmmaker and his works, that's perfectly fine. I have nothing against that, and I have nothing against people really praising him or praising his works, because again, this is just my own personal situation, but anyone who really adores his works and his films, and him as a filmmaker or as a person, that's perfectly fine, and I have no ill will at all. And so, and I actually think that's wonderful, and maybe you can teach me a few things about how to better appreciate his works. And so I just wanted to mention that, again, anything that I express that might seem maybe negative about a particular filmmaker or a particular film, please, the last thing I want is to suggest that you need to feel the same way. Again, it's completely up to you and your subjective tastes and your own personal film journey. And anything that I feel in my own personal film journey doesn't necessarily have to be the same experience that you have. And you can have a different take on the same material and have it be more positive than mine. And in those cases, of course, I'm always happy to hear any advice perhaps, or any way that you can inspire me or to teach me into how to better appreciate a particular work or something like that. So I just wanted to add that. So anyway, thank you very much, AllThingsFilm, for giving me the opportunity to provide this addendum. I really appreciate it. Then there is another question from Cinephiliac11. So hello, Cinephiliac11. It's nice to hear from you as always. You say, hello, Daisuke. Oh, you have a number of questions here. So number 1, what is the worst film you have seen included within the Criterion Collection? Isn't there one? So I think I've answered this question in a previous Q&A. So I think it was the first Q&A, I think. Number 2, what films would you love to be on the Criterion Collection? Again, I think I've answered this in another Q&A, but great questions so far. Thank you very much for this. Number 3, do you believe the death of cinema is near? That's a pretty, that's a deep question. And I would say that the answer, again, it depends on how you define cinema and how you define death, and I guess how you define near. But cinema, I understand that the landscape of cinema, or maybe the landscape of, in particular, mainstream cinema or commercial cinema, does change over time. And I guess that's true for any forms of cinema. And therefore, that is a significant component of cinema as many people understand the meaning of the term to be. So I completely get that. On the other hand, we have to keep in mind, of course, that cinema, in the broad sense of the term, is very wide. It's a wide sea of product and artwork. And therefore, there are so many films in the wild, too many to even begin to consider, to fathom. And so, with that in mind, for every film that I see, there are, I'm sure, I don't know, I'm taking a guess, but 10,000 films that I haven't seen. And so it is that vast. And therefore, it is, thinking of it in terms of the vastness of cinema, do I think that the death of cinema is near? No, I don't think so at all. Do I think it will change? Will cinema change? Of course. Things change as time progresses and new generations enter the fold. But and will I like those changes? Will I not like those changes? Again, time will tell. And who knows, perhaps by the time cinema makes, maybe there might be some really transformative changes to cinema in the next few years, but I don't know how long I will be around, because maybe I'll get older and older and older, and maybe, what I think might become not the point of people who are making the films. Again, I don't know what the situation will bring to us in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years from now. But at least as far as I can tell now, it is still a thriving art form, and it is going through certain directions and phases, of course. Whether one likes those phases or not, again, it depends on your own point of view. But even so, cinema also has this way of still sticking around, and so we can always revisit the films that we love and cherish. So I don't believe that the death of cinema is near, but it's a great question. Number 4, what films have you grown to love or cherish? Again, I think that's a pretty deep question, and I would say that any films I've grown to love or cherish, again, films that maybe I didn't necessarily love the first time, but then I really, really love now. I've brought up the example before, but I'll bring it up again. I'm very happy to, which is the film 8½, Otto e Mezzo. When I first saw the film, I was maybe quite a young person, and I admit I didn't quite get it at the time, and I didn't get it to the extent that I actually didn't like it very much. But then as I got older, and as I maybe gained a little bit of life experience, and I had a family, I got married and had a family, etc. I started to get a little bit more settled in my older years, let me put it that way. And when I revisited the film, I really began to appreciate it more and more, and for what I think it was trying to say, and the kind of angst and the kind of confusion, a wonderful swirl of confusion that I think it was trying to represent and present. And so I think that is a film that I actually have grown to love and cherish over time. So again, thank you for the question. And number 5, do you find enjoyment in introducing loved ones, family members to films you cherish? I think this is one of the most satisfying and enjoyable things to do. Yes, I do very much. And again, I have to be selective in terms of the films that I love, that I want to show my family or my children, because I don't want to, for example, show them, let's say, an age-inappropriate film. But with those caveats aside, and well established, of course, yes, I do find enjoyment in that. Does it work all the time? In other words, do they automatically love the films that I show them, that I love? No, not in the slightest. I mean, there are some films that I love, but they don't really like at all. But that's an understandable reaction. And even when I was that age, it wasn't necessarily the fact that I felt the same way about the film that I do now. So there is always room for growing into a film, as you suggested in your previous question, Cinephiliac 11. And so I think that's one of the but again, it's just sharing. I consider it maybe sharing a little bit of myself with my family in terms of my love of cinema. But I wouldn't necessarily go so far as to say that I would therefore expect them to love the same things that I love, because that's just impossible. That's an impossible expectation. But can I show them in a kind of timing that I think is appropriate in terms of their age and in terms of their own individual schedules with school and the like? Sure, of course. I think that's really fun to do. At the moment, I'm trying to show my daughter, who's now 8, some more musicals, and so she's at the age now where she loves to sing along with musicals, and she has these at her own school as well. And so I think at her school they were doing a sort of a musical, not the entire thing, but it was a kind of school show involving the Wizard of Oz. And so it was nice to share the Wizard of Oz film experience with her, because then we watched it together. And previous to that, there was some singing performance at her school where there was a group performance of songs from Singing in the Rain. And so that also provided the opportunity to share with her the film Singing in the Rain. So that was really nice. I'm not sure she liked it at the time. I don't know if I asked her now if she would say that it's the greatest films that she's ever seen. Maybe I'll ask her tonight and see if she remembers. But that's the sort of thing that I'm trying to do. So anyway, I hope that answers the question. And once again, thank you very much for the wonderful question that you provided. I really appreciate it. Okay, so I think with that, I will end here. And please note that if I haven't answered your question yet, don't worry. I will keep on going through these as much as I can. And so if you have any further questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments of that particular video, and I'll do my best to get back to you on those. So thank you very much once again for expressing interest in who I am and what I think. I'm very flattered as always, and I will just do my best to just let you know the responses that I have to your great questions. So thank you very much. So that's it for now. So until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies. Thank you once again, my friends, and cheers.